Narendra Dabholkar was an Indian activist who individually as well as through his organization called Maharashtra Andhashraddha Nirmoolan Samiti MANS spoke against and worked against superstitions, dogmas and all kind of unhealthy practices which were prevalent in our society. But unfortunately, around 8 years back in 2013, he was assassinated. Until date, we don't know who did it, we don't know who were the people behind it. But one thing that we do know is that he, along with many other people who have tried to raise their voice against superstitions, religions, have suffered the same fate. And yet, people who kill them haven't been able to kill these voices. And because when you cannot engage in an argument, cannot engage in a conversation, you go to the other extremes of violence. Which is why I would encourage you to read his works and read a lot of other works as well, which challenge the status quo, whether it's government or religion or society in general, and understand these arguments. And if you don't see any merit in these arguments, you can articulate that yourself. So we should encourage this culture of debate and conversations where we can improve our arguments instead of shunning the other person's voice. So I've got this book with me by Narendra Dabholkar. The book is called The Case for Reason. And in this book, like many of his works, he speaks from scientific point of view. He talks about religion, he talks about the idea of God and all other superstitions that are there. And then very carefully, he attends different kinds of arguments and improves our understanding of all these issues. Unfortunately, we all know in many parts of the world, including in India, there are religious dogmas and superstitions everywhere. But there are people also out there who are resisting these dogmas, who are raising their voices, and we have to listen to them. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to narrate some of the arguments made by Narendra Dabholkar in his book. And these arguments are made in the chapter called The Concept of God, where he just takes apart this idea of God and as a rationalist that he was, he helps us understand this concept of God and various arguments in support of it, various dimensions of it. So, without any delay, let me narrate this for you. Long before the advent of human beings, the animal kingdom was already established on earth. The application of simple logic shows us that these creatures were unlikely to have any concept of God. Then came monkeys and apes, followed by the forest man. Early man neither developed any language nor harbored any notion of a higher power. In the due course of evolution, a process of production-based labor and cooperation evolved among humans. Then came the birth of language, the formation of various ideas, and an increase in knowledge. Even then, there was no concept of God. Therefore, Based on the evidence, the origin of the concept of God dates back to 10,000 years at most. Anthropologists believe the idea originated with the dissolution of primitive nomadic society. With general advancement in material circumstances, perhaps man's desire and egotism expanded as well. These must have sowed the seeds in his mind for the development of the idea of God. One thing is for sure, all notions of God and all the gods we know are a product of man's brain. Man also decided how these gods were and were not supposed to behave. Using his imagination, he has created a world of his own, quite distinct from those of animals. Man then went on to discover and invent new things. His aim behind this was to ensure his own progress, stability, peace, and happiness. The concept of God and its inception is an outcome of the effort. Man tested his creations on himself, and these included his experiments with the concept of God as well. He examined it several times in various ways. In the process, he has wasted a lot of time and energy. Some people think it wasn't at all a waste, that these God experiments have benefited mankind a lot. There is also a group of people who think that this was not a very productive investment. Which of these opinions you support depends on the way you define the concept of God. Nature has bestowed two appetites on man. The first is his hunger for food, and the other is his sex drive. Satisfying these appetites ensured self-protection and the preservation of the human race. These purposes exist even today and will continue to do so forever. Meanwhile, man has invented a third appetite, the need for knowledge. In his efforts to meet it, he has created a world of his own. The concept of God was born out of this mindset of intellectual experimentation. Indeed, it is the loftiest manifestation of human genius. Based on it, man established ideas of piety, stability, and safety. But soon the concept of God enslaved him. If God did exist, there should have been only one single God for the whole world. Ishwar, Allah, the Father in heaven, shouldn't have been more than one entity. All great souls who experience divine visions should have seen the same God. But their visions are different, and so is the knowledge they received. That's because the images and thoughts of these visionaries stem from their own selves, not outside. These awakened beings must have searched for God in their minds, not out in the world. Their distinct intellects and acquired knowledge would have caused them to have disparate visions. They went on to propagate their learnings for the benefit of mankind. But man, who is like a speck in this unfathomable, gigantic expanse of the universe, felt awed and confused. He must have sought refuge in the omnipotent God of his own imagination to calm his troubled mind. In India, it was once thought that the assumption of divine creation is no great sign of intelligence. Dharmakriti was a great philosopher and a principal at Nalanda University. According to him, 3 beliefs were the main characteristics of stupidity. 1. That God made the universe. 2. The Vedas are valid. 3. That you can wipe away your sins with bathing, fasting, and penance. One cannot prove God's existence using rational arguments. The truth is that we want God to exist. That's why many of us are willing to accept faulty logic to prove his existence. Vaman Malhar Joshi offered this pertinent quote in his book Niti Shastra Pravesh, that is, Introduction to Ethics. Society can develop confidence in its own ability, but people need to understand one thing. Ram, Krishna, Buddha, Mahavir, Jesus Christ, Muhammad, Guru Nanak, they were all heroes. Their thoughts and deeds form the epitome of human valor, wisdom, and maturity. But they weren't gods. Whether their deification is benevolent or malevolent is, of course, debatable. God, angel, heaven, soul, and other such concepts were born in the course of the evolution of the human race. These words captured the imagination of the people at large, but the shrewd and culturally powerful used them to exploit the unsuspecting. Materialist intellectuals such as Charvaka and Dignaga denied the idea of God. Gautam Buddha shunned idol worship. Chakradhar refuted many concepts from the Vedas. Lenin, Mao, and Marxist intellectuals from other countries disbelieved in the notion of God, and so did our very own Bhagat Singh, Nana Sahib, Gaur, Madharao, Bagal, and E.V. Ramaswamy Periyar. Another set of people believes in the existence of God or wishes that he exists. For them, the meaning of God is support for good deeds and opposition to exploitation and suffering. They refuse to accept that God can fuel vested interests, discrimination, and exploitation. They cannot imagine God supporting meaningless rituals, cruel customs, casteism, or superstition. These souls have fought against such vicious tendencies throughout their life. People like Mahatma Jyotiba Phule, Vitthal Ramji Shinde, and Sane Guruji. Then there are the many who believe in God because of their traditional upbringing. They neither have a firm intellectual stand nor try to defend their views. This is merely ignorance at play. These people are unable to defy traditions because they are entangled in superstition. They may even fear being cast out by their caste or panchayat, or they think it is their duty to support fortune tellers, pujaris, priests, and the like. The number of such believers is huge. While one can understand why they believe in God, it is not possible to engage in a specific argument with them about the existence of God, because they believe there is no need to discuss their stand. Another category of people includes those who are generally indifferent to any debate on the topic of God. This group maintains that a belief in God is a psychological need. They feel it is beneficial for both the individual and society. According to them, God loves and protects us and blesses us with good sense. He treasures devotions and imbues us with strength. At times, He punishes us for our sins. He helps us overcome difficulties, no matter how insurmountable they may be. A belief in God makes life happy, they say. Atheists, on the other hand, are quite unambiguous in their assertion that God doesn't exist at all. They insist that it is an erroneous concept, a falsehood. They think it's a hypothetical idea created by primitive man. Believing that God can help us overcome any crisis is escapism and self-deception, they assert. They are in favor of scientifically analyzing the problems of life and facing them with courage. The earlier the human race gets rid of the idea of God, they say, the brighter and more dynamic its future would be. Atheism is an ancient independent philosophy now widespread. The great skeptics of yore have used logical and radical points in all their arguments. They never lost to anyone on the level of ratiocination. At the same time, their views couldn't hold sway over the masses for a prolonged period in any part of the world. A few recent surveys in some countries show an increase in the number of non believers, though. The theists offer a different argument. All elements, even in their infinitesimal form, have huge amounts of energy. Each form has a specific velocity, but the position and velocity of this infinitesimal form are related and not independent of each other. Mobility isn't rule bound. But this line of argument does not hold, nor does it prove the existence of God. It ignores the most important point. The problem whether God exists or not is not about enormous amounts of energy or the lack thereof. While all five elements boast gargantuan powers, they don't have a mind, will, or emotion. This is where God is different. Many scientists believe in the God principle, but the concept of God as a hypothesis isn't necessary for science. So scientists may believe in God, but science doesn't. There are three categories of philosophers who enter into discussions on God. The first comprises those who stand by the Holy Scriptures, sages and saints, preceptors of various religious orders, and followers. What is interesting is that in any debate on God, the texts aren't given much significance. The second category of people believes in mystic revelation, not logical thinking. The fundamental proof of divine rule, they feel, is what the heart experiences. Texts and reasoning for them are not the core testimonies. Sole reliance on holy books makes the concept of God unsound. Revelation alone can remove all doubt on the existence of God, they say. The third category includes philosophers who use reason to bolster their arguments. Many of them were in the West: Plato, Aristotle, Descartes, Locke. They found inspiration in traditional religious sects and argued in support of God. The philosophers first made an ontological point that we can imagine an existence far superior and perfect beyond the visible world. This perfect existence is God. It's possible to think of it because everything we see and experience seems imperfect. From their imperfections, we can picture perfection. That perfect, virtuous thing is God. The second argument is cosmological and rests on the universal principle of causality. The philosophers maintain that the place from where the chain of cause and effect begins is God. The third argument is that the construction of the universe is harmonious. Consider, for example, the human body. The eyes, ears, nose, and various organs are in perfect sync with each other. Only a perfect, talented craftsman can create such a structure. This also applies to animals, the solar system, and every substance on earth. Whatever we see, none of it is discordant. So the creator of the universe has to be an omniscient, omnipotent artist. Immanuel Kant refuted all these arguments. The German philosopher proposed an ethics-based counter to prove the existence of God. He said that despite their moral behavior, so many people remain poor and suffer in pain and grief. But there are scores of criminals who are happy and lead a life of luxury. This irony indicates that justice and morality have no place in this world. Yet, humans are moral. Man has a pure, discretionary intellect in his heart, which results in his steadfastness to pure morality. Secularism, though, cannot provide any such justification for pure moral behavior. Even when you concede that truth prevails in the end, you have to assume that in the end means after death. If there is a judgment on morality or criminality at this point, it means life exists post death. This translates into the existence of the immortal soul, the one who sees everything, who is omnipotent and fair and provides justice to immortal souls, is God. The Discovery Institute in Seattle has proposed the intelligent design movement, that is, ID movement. It is an outcome of the many and varied propositions offered to prove the existence of God. The movement maintains that modern science cannot unravel the mysteries of the universe. The world's organic, physical, and chemical structure has seen copious changes over millennia and will always do so. Even Darwin's theory has been unable to do justice to the clutter and complexity involved. So all these events must have emanated from an omnipotent, invisible power at the helm. To solve the puzzle of the universe, the Institute recommends you study the concept of ID along with Darwin's findings. Many parents in the USA support the inclusion of ID in their children's education. Scientists, though, oppose the move. They feel the concept introduces religion and theism into curricula and robs children of the opportunity to develop a rational outlook. Science depends on objectivity, hypothesis, and experiential evidence, not on popular opinion. Because ID is an intangible theory, one cannot observe or experiment with it. In fact, it fails various verification tests. It doesn't tell us anything about the designer or their intention to create the universe in the first place. It doesn't have any valid proof showing an invisible, higher, omnipotent power. Here's another argument. Because the world seems to have a plan and structure, it has to have a planner or builder behind it. That is, God. Science, though, can reveal all the natural laws that have led to this plan and structure. There is no need to credit an invisible entity for it. Also, what is this planner or builder busy with during a deluge, tempest, famine, or earthquake, you may ask? Science attributes these to the principle of causality, which ID supporters shoot down. An inviolable natural law, causality is provable through evidence and experiments. But ID has no element of causality. Science has several questions for the supporters of this movement. If God has created the universe, does the process of creation continue or has it stopped? What is the next step after the creation of the universe? Nobody has any answers to these. Rationalists have challenged all the above arguments by theists. Moral values can be upheld in society without God or religious rituals. Seeking pleasure and joy is man's instinctive drive, but he also understands the need to serve others. He knows that he should behave unto others as he would like them to behave with him. Man does not care about ethics and morality. The concept of God isn't necessary to inculcate a love for the environment or humanity. Whether someone is useless or reliable doesn't depend on their belief or disbelief in God. Their worth is evident through their talk, conduct, and interactions. The concept of God is popular worldwide for three reasons. First, it's considered the best formula for overcoming fear, helplessness, and insecurity. Second, it's deemed vital for one's happiness. And third, it's said to be ticket to eternal bliss. The concept offers simplified answers to every question on earth. These answers attract people. Human thinking and understanding propose alternative and convincing solutions to these concerns, though. They even show how to put these solutions into practice. One of them is the development of a democratic humanitarian organization. The desire to boost happiness by appeasing God is nothing but consumerism. Those who indulge in such practices should remember Gandhiji's words. The world has enough for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed. We have limited resources, whereas human wants are innumerable. Limitless, unrestricted consumption will leave a barren earth for future generations. Those who beg God for even more pleasures should bear this in mind. Contrary to popular opinion, the concept of God cannot relieve one from the cycle of birth and death, nor can it endow one with eternal bliss. You can only achieve true bliss by engaging in a worthy cause and persisting in it. The resulting feeling of satisfaction can only be an outcome of your efforts. A mere belief in God cannot bring it about. As per rationalists across the world, taking apart the concept of God is the only way to eradicate superstition. For them, being neutral to the topic of God is capitulating out of fear. Some of them are aware that grassroots bodies such as ANS have to take a flexible stand on these matters. They understand our need to avoid public wrath. Theist opponents, on the other hand, feel this view of ours signifies our lack of power to execute our real aim. They think we will start atheist propaganda once again when we gain our strength. In all these disparate but fervent opinions, the real stand of bodies such as ANS on the concept of God gets lost. Our position on this topic is appropriate, scientific, and in line with our cause. Whenever anyone asks us about our belief in God, we dismiss the question as irrelevant. We add that the question lacks a concrete definition of God. Analyze our answer and you would know how to approach the concept while working to end superstition. When a person asks someone whether they believe in God or not, they don't factor in the various meanings of God. Each of these connotations related to an individual's perspective and their own perception of God is significant. Some of them are acceptable, some are not, while a few others are ambiguous. Moreover, every person has different answers to this question, so to examine the concept of God, we need to consider all its interpretations. The first meaning sees God as the creator, as believed by Mahatma Phule, for instance. If someone stated this view 2 centuries ago, we would have shrugged at it. But now, science has shown how the solar system and Earth were born. You don't need the hypothesis of God to understand this process of creation. But if you ask us who created the universe, we would say that modern science is yet to answer this question. We can form 2 hypotheses here. 1, God created the universe. 2, the universe came into being on its own out of causality. Science will back the second one when it's proven. Right now, our stand is agnostic as the answer doesn't have a valid explanation yet. Theists, of course, swear by the first hypothesis. Their rationale is that wherever there is a creation, paper, pen, table, chair, etc., it ought to have a creator. In the case of the universe, they say the creator is God. Those who proffer this argument forget that we can turn it back on them. The creator has to be a creation too, so who created the creator? Our opponents respond that the Creator is self born and self extant, which means that God is bound by causality. So they have to conclude that the universe is self governed by causality. Aren't God's self born status and adherence to causality contradictory? The second connotation of God is that of a controller, meaning whatever happens in the universe does so only by His will. Even the tiny leaf of a plant cannot move unless He wills it. He is the sole doer and maker. We reject this stand. Let's face it, the world is rife with discrimination and injustice. Everywhere we come across lives and properties destroyed by natural disasters. The atom bomb burns out thousands in a moment. A vicious Hitler slaughtered 6 million human beings. If the all-benevolent God controls everything, why does He let such cruelty happen? But these calamities do strike the world unabated. So we have to conclude that God is neither the controller nor able to control the world. This is as good as refuting His omnipotence. Our answer to does an individual believe in God depends on the meaning of God that the questioner holds. If the questioner considers God to be the creator of the universe, our stand will be agnostic. If it is God as the creator, controller, and governor of the universe, we'll oppose these tags. It has no interest in discussing the concept of a shapeless God sans attributes. Also, the concept of an omniscient, omnipotent, benevolent God is full of contradictions, which we should discuss with the public at large. Those who want to conceive of God as a source of bliss and joy have every right to do so. If you view God as a psychological support, counselor, or shock absorber, we will not react to your belief. However, we reject the idea that God performs miracles and accepts bribes. We welcome those who feel that God is evident through ethical thoughts and actions. We would love to have a dialogue with these believers. Although we don't find it necessary to perceive God even in this form, a person's moral conduct stems from their own reason and intellect. It's not due to the voice of God or any religious command.